I am 79 years old. At this age, the house is quiet in a way that feels permanent. Not peaceful, just quiet. The kind of quiet that reminds you how many voices used to fill a place and how few remain. I spend most mornings sitting near the kitchen window, the same chair, the same chipped mug, coffee that goes cold before I finish it. There isn't much to hurry toward anymore, and when you reach a point like this, the mind begins to move backward whether you want it to or not. You start noticing the shape your life took, not the big moments people like to talk about, but the small decisions that stacked up quietly over decades. I used to believe I was doing everything right. That belief carried me through most of my life. Now I'm not so sure. For most of my adult years, I chased security. That was the word I used. Security sounded responsible. It sounded like maturity, like the kind of thing a good husband and father should pursue.
And to be fair, it wasn't a foolish goal. When I was 23, I had very little. A small apartment with thin walls, a used car that stalled in winter, a job that paid just enough to keep the lights on. I had recently married my wife, Ellen. She laughed easily back then, loud, unguarded laughter that filled rooms. We would sit on the floor of that little apartment and eat cheap takeout from paper cartons. Sometimes we didn't even bother with plates. We talked about everything: the future, trips we wanted to take, the kind of house we imagined someday, the children we hoped would come along. Those nights felt full. But even then, there was a quiet worry inside me. I had grown up watching my own father struggle with money, bills that arrived faster than his paychecks, stress that hung over the house like a storm cloud. I promised myself I would never live that way. So when an opportunity came along at the company where I worked, a promotion that meant longer hours and more responsibility, I took it without hesitation. It felt like the obvious choice. We needed stability. That's what I told myself. Ellen supported me, at least in the beginning. She packed lunches for me in the mornings, wrote little notes on napkins sometimes. "Don't forget to eat," she would write, or "Come home early tonight." I meant to, but early became late more often than I expected. Work has a way of expanding to fill whatever space you give it. Deadlines, meetings, projects that needed one more revision, one more phone call, one more hour. I kept telling myself it was temporary, just until we got ahead, just until the next promotion, just until things felt secure. When our first child was born, a boy named Daniel, I remember standing in the hospital hallway holding him in a blanket. He was so small it scared me. I remember thinking, now I really have to provide. That feeling settled into my bones. From that point on, almost every decision I made ran through the same filter. Will this make us safer? More stable? More protected from the uncertainty I feared? And slowly, without noticing it, my days became structured around work. Morning, leave before the sun was fully up. Evening, return after dinner. Sometimes Daniel was already asleep when I got home. Ellen would sit with me at the kitchen table while I ate leftovers. She would tell me about her day, about Daniel's first words, his small accidents, the funny way he mispronounced things. I listened, but often I was tired, my mind still half inside the office. I told myself there would be more time later, when things settled down. Years passed that way. 2 children became 3. We moved into a larger house, then a slightly nicer one in a quieter neighborhood. On paper, life looked like progress. My salary increased, my title improved. The savings account slowly grew.
I felt proud of that. I believed I was building something solid for my family. But looking back now, I see something else happening at the same time. Little moments slipping past me. Daniel's first baseball game. I missed it because a client meeting ran long. My daughter Lucy's school playing. I arrived just as the audience was leaving. Ellen stopped writing notes in my lunch after a few years. I didn't notice when that stopped. She asked once if we could take a weekend trip together, just the two of us. I remember telling her work was too busy right then. Maybe next month, I said. Next month became next year, and then the topic stopped coming up. None of these moments felt like major decisions at the time. They were small trade-offs, practical ones. If I stayed late, I thought, it would help the company. If it helped the company, it would help my career. If my career improved, our family would be safer. It was a chain of reasoning that made perfect sense. For decades. Our house was always comfortable. The bills were paid on time. The kids had what they needed. But something else was happening in quieter ways. Dinner conversations became shorter. Family traditions faded. I stopped noticing how quickly the children were growing. They developed lives of their own, friends, interests, small worlds that didn't include me very much. That part seemed normal. Children grow up. Fathers work. At least that's what I believed. Ellen changed slowly too. Not in dramatic ways, just quieter. The easy laughter she once had didn't appear as often. She still kept the house running, still attended school meetings and birthdays and all the events I couldn't make. She carried those things alone more often than I realized. We still talked in the evenings, but the conversations became practical. Schedules, bills, repairs, the future. We talked about the future a lot. Once things calm down, I would say, when I retire, we'll finally have time. She would nod. But sometimes she looked at me in a way I didn't quite understand then. Not angry, just tired. Years moved quickly after that. Work became even more consuming in my 40s and 50s. More responsibilities, larger teams, bigger projects. I felt important, needed. The company depended on me. That's what it felt like. Meanwhile, the children became adults. Daniel left for college. Lucy moved across the country for a job. The youngest, Michael, joined the military. I remember standing in the driveway the day Michael left. The house looked suddenly larger than it used to. Ellen and I sat at the kitchen table that evening with 2 empty chairs between us. "Feels strange," she said. I agreed. But the quiet didn't last long. Work kept filling the hours. Then, one winter morning, Ellen told me she had been feeling unusually tired. She brushed it off at first, but the doctor visits began. Tests, more appointments. I still remember the day we sat in a small office while a doctor explained the results. Cancer. A word that lands heavily in a room. Time changed shape after that. Suddenly there were things I wanted to say that had waited for decades. Trips I wanted to take with her. Conversations we had postponed. But illness moves in one direction. Ellen grew weaker over the following year. I began coming home early, taking days off, sitting beside her on the couch while she slept. The house was quiet again, but in a different way. One afternoon she looked at me and said something very gently. "We kept waiting, didn't we?" I knew what she meant. We had waited for the right moment, the calm period, the future where everything slowed down and we finally lived the life we imagined. But that future never arrived. She passed away on a cloudy morning in early spring. After the funeral, people filled the house for a few hours. Old friends, our children, neighbors bringing food. Then they left. The silence returned. And that was when the realization truly settled in. Security had been my life's project, and in many ways I succeeded. The house was paid off, the retirement account was comfortable. There were no debts hanging over us. But the person I had been working so hard to protect a future with was gone. The children visited when they could, but their lives were elsewhere now. Cities far away, careers, families of their own. Our conversations were polite and warm, but brief. There were years of shared daily life missing between us. Not hostility, just distance. Time had built that distance quietly, while I was busy elsewhere. I still see them a few times each year, holidays mostly. They are kind to me.
But they remember their childhood mostly through their mother. The school events, the late-night talks, the things I was too busy to attend. Sometimes I walk through old photo albums. There are pictures where I'm missing entirely. Someone else must have taken the photo. A birthday cake with candles. A graduation ceremony. A family picnic. I was probably at the office that day. None of it seemed urgent at the time. Work always felt urgent. But urgency can be misleading. Looking back now, the things I thought were temporary sacrifices became permanent absences. Moments that belonged to other people instead of me. I don't say this with bitterness. I made the choices I believed were right. A younger version of me truly thought he was protecting his family from hardship. But protection can turn into distance if you're not careful. And distance, once it stretches across years, becomes difficult to cross again. These days I move slowly around the house. Some rooms are rarely used. Ellen's favorite chair still sits by the window. I haven't moved it. In the evenings, I sometimes think about those early nights in our first apartment, eating takeout on the floor, talking for hours about a future that seemed wide open. We assumed time would always be waiting for us. It isn't. If you're listening to this, I won't pretend to know your life. Everyone carries different responsibilities, different fears. But I do know how quietly time disappears. 1 year becomes 10 without much warning. Children grow up, partners grow older, and the future you keep postponing your life for eventually becomes the past. I'm not saying work is wrong, or planning, or trying to create stability. Those things matter. But I wish someone had told me something simple when I was young. Security is useful, but it doesn't replace presence. You can provide a comfortable life and still miss the life itself. I would give a great deal now to sit again in that small apartment with Ellen laughing across from me. No promotions, no deadlines, just the sound of her voice filling the room. But memory is the only place that still exists. At 79, the horizon ahead is shorter than the road behind me. I can feel that in small ways. The slower mornings, the doctor visits, the quiet understanding that time is no longer something I can assume. So I sit by the kitchen window with my coffee and think about the years that passed while I was busy preparing for them. If you're younger than me, there is still space in your life where choices are flexible. I won't tell you what to do. I can only tell you what it feels like to arrive at the end of a long road and realize how many conversations were postponed for later. Later can disappear. That's all.
The house is quiet again now. Soon the light outside the window will fade, and evening will settle in the way it always does.
I will turn off the kitchen light, walk slowly down the hallway, and close the door to another ordinary day. At my age, the days are simple, and when I think back on everything I spent decades building, the thing I miss most is something I kept telling myself I would get to eventually. Time with the people who were already there.